A little more than 20 years ago, I had a sales manager at the company I was working for at the time who decided that I was going to be his closest confidant. I was, at the time, his most seasoned and I believe his most productive sales rep. So he decided, like I said, I was going to be the guy that he came to and complained about all of the other sales representatives on the staff. I would get called into his office all the time where he would vent to me about how lazy they all were. And I would listen to him and just kind of nod and smile and go along with it when he would do that. And then finally one time I just sort of piped up and I said, Gary, and by the way, never mind the fact that these reps, they were sitting, what he was complaining about is they were just sitting in his cubicle or in their cubicles, not doing anything. And like I said, forget for a second that was pretty much exactly what he was doing all the time, is just sitting in his office scrolling through social media. And I don't think social media was a thing at the time, but talking on the phone to his other counterparts around the country and that type of thing. But anyway, I said, Gary, I said, laziness is a character issue. And I don't think that these people have character problems. I pointed the tree out the window and I said, if that tree out there suddenly started sprouting $100 bills, I said, how lazy do you think suddenly everyone would be? I said, they'd be up out of their seat going out and harvesting all of that money because it was there, easy for the getting. And I said, what appears to you as a character problem, laziness in this case, is the fact that these folks are just, call it scared, call it whatever, they're paralyzed by their lack of confidence in what they're doing. They're really looking for leadership. My name is Mark Light, and I'm the founder of a brand new SKOOL community, and I'll put the link down in the descriptions here, or in the description, called the Sales Pros Gap. And I invite you to join it. And I have a lot of people ever since starting this here just a few days ago who have been asking me, Mark, why are you starting a SKOOL community on sales training? And it's really sales mindset more than anything. But I am a 35-year veteran sales representative, including a sales trainer. And the answer is, look, two things. First of all, the time I spent as a sales trainer was probably the greatest job I'd ever had. I was extremely passionate about teaching people and helping them become better. Also, hey, let's face it, I'm only about 2 or 3 months shy of being declared cancer-free after a 3.5-year battle with stage 4 cancer. And I didn't survive a walk through hell just so I could go out and do ordinary shit. So here I am. Anyway, even though at the time that this sales manager was venting to me, we'll call it, at that time I was his most productive representative. Things didn't start out that way. For probably the first 10 years that I was in sales, I was an absolute miserable failure. I struggled. In fact, when I first got into sales, just the thought of sitting in someone's home or office and doing a presentation scared me like you have no idea. I would sit by the phone. This really did happen. I would sit by the phone just trembling, almost crying, thinking I need to call my boss and tell him I can't do sales. I'm just not cut out for this. And to try to get better and try to get more comfortable, I went to every sales training seminar and bought every sales training book and tape I could possibly get my hands on, and it never seemed to work. And that's because learning all kinds of techniques, which I did learn, they weren't going to do me any good until I addressed the space right in between my ears. And I'm not talking about the lack of sales knowledge. See, one of the things I've learned in my 35 years, and particularly as a sales trainer, is I can teach people, or somebody can teach people, all of the sales techniques in the world. And they're really not going to do you a heck of a lot of good unless you address what really is the problem. One of the favorite book titles, and I haven't actually read the book yet, but it's in my to-read list, but the greatest book title I've ever seen is, I believe it goes, "If how-tos were enough, we'd all be skinny, rich, and happy." And boy, that holds true for sales. I could give you the greatest sales scripts and techniques that you've ever seen, and those alone just aren't going to do much for a struggling salesperson. When I was a sales trainer, one of the things I learned pretty quickly, and we taught some phenomenally useful sales techniques and very transformative, but I started noticing pretty quickly that the more and more I would meet with the students, our clients, very little of this shit was getting implemented out in the field. And if you talk to anybody who's been in corporate sales or sales for any length of time, they're going to tell you that's their experience as well. Corporations are known for bringing in sales trainers left, right, and center, and yet nobody ever implements the stuff that they learn. So sales techniques by themselves just are not going to do a ton of good. What you have to do in order to actually help somebody transform in their sales career is address 3 different things simultaneously, and do so in a very systematic and micro-dose approach. And those 3 things are, of course, the tactics that we already talked about here, that I already mentioned here in this video, but then activity, and then the confidence, the mindset, the resilience. If you can get all 3 of those things working together, then you have the makings of making a salesperson who was previously struggling and making them unstoppable. And that's what I'm doing here, building my community Sales Pros Gap in the School platform. And I invite you to go there. The link, like I said, is down in the description. Check it out. Consider joining. If you go there right now, as of the recording here that I'm doing, you're going to find there's no content in there whatsoever, and that's because I just launched the community. I'm still trying to build a few members and get them engaged, because I want to build this thing not according to what I think is important or think should be important, but build it according to what is really important to the people who are in the community there. I've got like I said, a 35-year treasure of experiences and knowledge in my head. But what actually makes it out into the content in that course needs to be not according to what I think. Like I said, it needs to be according to what the students, the members of the community feel like is important in order to help them advance and improve as sales reps. So wanted to pass that along. I just thought I'd add a little bit of context onto why I chose to go down this road here and give you a little bit of background on myself. So y'all have a great day.